Beaming to you from the Plastic Microphone Studios, nestled deep in the heart of Cajun country. Welcome to Fave 5 from Fans. I'm your ever-enthusiastic host, Jamie Ray, and I am thrilled to have you join us for another exciting episode of the podcast dedicated to all things favorite. Hey, let's welcome our guests as they lead us into their 5 top... See, I did it already. Favorites. Today, I've invited 2 guests to the Plastic Microphone Studios to discuss our Fave 5 Marvel leaders. First up is Dr. Gordon Schmidt. He is a professor of management and the director of the Turrentine School of Management at ULM, that's University of Louisiana, Monroe. He researches leadership, the future of work, management science, outreach through popular culture, and management education. He's written books teaching leaderships through the Marvel films and the Avatar, The Last Bender. Not the one with the tall blue aliens, but the other guy. Dr. Schmidt teaches courses. That's the next book. That's the next book. He teaches courses in leadership and human resources. Second is Sy Islam, PhD. He is the vice president of consulting at Talent Metrics in Long Island, New York. New York City? Never mind. He has over 10 years of experience in a variety of corporate, academic, and applied sciences. He is an associate professor of industrial organizational psychology. Wow, how did I get these guys on the show? And he collaborates with organizations from consulting in all of his areas of expertise. He is a passionate advocate for the field of industrial organizational psychology, as discussed in the last sentence. And he uses those technologies and tools of IO psychology in his consulting practice. Oh, man, the IQ, and you guys have brought it all up, but welcome to the Plastic Microphone Studios, gentlemen.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having us.
Very excited.
No, thank you. Thank you. So I'm really excited to do this. Gordon and I met at the Fan Expo New Orleans back in January.
Great time.
And I love that show. And we started discussing, and he was telling me about his book based on Marvel leadership. And so, of course, I had to get him on the show. And then he brings up that he has his partner, Sy, and we've now got all of these big brains and me on one show. So, guys, again, I'm super excited. I know you've put in some work for this, and I appreciate you coming.
Thank you for having us. I can confirm, I believe that Gordon and I are medium-sized brains.
Oh, okay. Well, that's how you use it, right? That's
That's right. That's what my wife tells me.
So, guys, we are going to have a spot later on in the show where we're going to talk about what you do, but I'm so excited to get into this. I've asked y'all to make your list of your 5 favorite Marvel leaders and a few honorable mentions. I think you 2 went above and beyond. Is that correct?
Of course. I thought we were going to get graded, so I thought it.
Extra credit.
Extra credit, right?
So you 2 have one list of the good guys and one list of the bad guys. So, wow, I'm just, again, blown away. So I can't wait for that. So if you're ready, I'm ready. Sy, we'd like to start with you. Give us your honorable mentions of your favorite Marvel leaders.
All right, so I've got 3 honorable mentions of Marvel leaders. We'll start with... Okay, I'll start with the villains, just because I think the villains might be a little more surprising. Okay. My first honorable mention is Thanos. I like Thanos as a character. I grew up reading a lot of Adam Warlock comics from my brother. He gave me a bunch of old Adam Warlock comics, and Thanos was always kind of in the background. He had his whole alien hordes. He was always chasing after death, and so he's not in my opinion my favorite leader. But I think he can lead pretty effectively. He might be a little bit better in the movies because he actually has a clearer mission, rather than just I really love death. I love skeletons. So that's the first one. Second honorable mention is somebody who's very recently in the last, I want to say 20-25 years, has become a villainous leader of and in my opinion has become super overpowered. And that's Norman Osborn.
Oh yeah.
After Dark Reign, he just like amped up to like Joker level in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He's become just like this, weird like villain, anti-hero, villain, leader. And he might be too crazy to actually be completely effective, but definitely he's gotten some really good stories. Um
Going around making babies with MJ.
yeah, okay,
No,
all
not
right.
MJ.
We don't talk about that. We don't need to talk.
Okay.
This is,
We don't talk.
Okay.
this is a
I didn't read the
fan
most recent issue, Jamie, so don't spoil that for me because I don't want to know.
One more day never happened, as far as I'm concerned.
We don't talk about Osborn. Oh. Sorry, now that's Disney. Please don't sue me.
That's we don't talk about that. Somebody's plans are a little too weird for like normal fandom, but I guess some writers really like it. But definitely I think he's a very interesting leader. And then Gordon and I started writing another thing about somebody who's not necessarily a leader, but somebody we both like. And I'm actually interested to find out if he shows up on Gordon's list, and that is Taskmaster. Who's,
okay.
He's not a leader in the traditional sense, but he's a guiding force and a mentor for lots of people to kind of learn how to fight effectively, how to coordinate effectively. So there's a lot there. So he exercises leadership in ways that I think a lot of people don't think about or consider. But he's a big force in the Marvel Cinematic, not Marvel Cinematic Universe, but the Marvel Comics. Maybe she will be a big force in Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm not sure. We'll see when Thunderbolts comes out. But that's my villainous honorable mention. Did you want me to also do the heroes?
Yeah, go ahead and do your heroes.
Okay, so for the heroes, we're going to start with a character that I really like, but that I have only a little bit of knowledge of from the Champions run of being a leader, and that's Ms. Marvel.
Okay.
She's my honorable mentions. I think she's a really good leader because she kind of in her community leads in Jersey City, leads in a variety of different ways. You can kind of see her leading the Champions a little bit, in how that very young team needs some guidance, and she takes on some tough decisions. And then in the most recent comics, the Mutant Menace and things like that, you can already start to see her as potentially leading the new NYX team in the future because she's got a lot to say and she's got a lot more experience, I think, than many of the other leaders or the other members of the the mutant folks. All right, another very old school leader that I grew up really liking, and I think he's gotten a bit of a bad rap, is Reed Richards. Reed Richards, so there's been a trend among some of the older heroes like Xavier, anybody who's in the Illuminati, right? Basically, they went from in the 60s, 70s, 80s, they're like, oh, these guys are infallible, to like every story over the past like 25 years. How much worse can these guys suck? Yeah. But I still have a soft spot for Reed. I remember Reed Richards, like my early comics reading was him being like kind of more of like a fatherly, like the kind of 60s, 70s fatherly figure that you think of, like not deeply emotional, but not emotionally stunted, as I think a lot of people tend to think of him. One thing I see a lot, and I don't know, Gordon, if you've seen this either, or Jamie, if you've seen this either, people are like projecting some sort of like, oh, Reed's on the spectrum type thing. I'm like, I don't think he is. I think that's just like a silly shorthand. I think he's a reserved genius, right? Who maybe doesn't have the best social skills, but I think he's a good leader. I think he manages stuff in with the Fantastic Four that other leaders I don't think really think about or manage that well. Like he's a scientist, so he manages like grant funding. He has to produce all
grant funding.
Yeah, you know.
No wonder he doesn't make the list. The Exciting Adventures of Grant Funding didn't make your top 5 side. Come on.
Oh, top cha-ching.
It's a shocking.
He doesn't make the top 5. No.
Yeah, I didn't see that mini series either. The Fantastic Four, the Grant enthusiast. Nope.
No. Even the one that takes place in the 60s that came out in the late 90s, early 2000s. I'm forgetting the name of it now, but the the one that kind of like sheds a more realistic light on what their life was like in the 60s.
Yeah.
Even then, he's like managing a bunch of stuff, but the Baxter building doesn't run itself. Sue definitely helps with a lot of that, but he's also like he's Mr. Fantastic. He's doing all of that, and like a good principal investigator, like a good researcher, I'm sure he doesn't give up that much control.
Right.
Right?
Right.
He's and then third on my honorable mentions list is Shuri, because I think in the more recent Black Panther comics, she's taken on the mantle of leadership. She's been exercising that leadership, especially as T'Challa has been, he's got this bad habit of like popping in and out of Wakanda. So somebody has to step up. It's either her, one of the Dora Milaje, and that environment of her like taking on the mantle and living up to the mantle of being like the youngest Black Panther is, I think, really difficult and really challenging. So I think that's one of the big things to note about the character is that she has some similar traits to T'Challa, but she's a little bit more decisive. She doesn't she's not planning at the same level. She's kind of going with her gut a little bit more. But I do like her character quite a bit, especially in that leadership role. And there just aren't enough female leaders in the Marvel Cinematic Universe or in Marvel in general. So it's always good to have one.
Yeah. Wow, that's strong list starting out, man. All right. Whew, that's strong. Well, Gordon, I think he's just throwing down the gauntlet. What are your honorable mentions?
Yeah, so I definitely would say that my list is a lot better, but I do respect the quality of the list that he came up with. So one of the first ones that I thought of, which didn't make my list, on the villain side, is Dr. Octopus.
Oh,
And Dr. Octopus, so the era that I came into Dr. Octopus has been all over the place, in terms of being smart, being kind of dumb, being on his own, being part of a group.
Being part of a Spider-Man.
Yeah, being Spider-Man, spoilers. So when I started, it was really during the era when they started with the Sinister Six, and that early 90s, we had the Amazing Spider-Man Sinister Six, and we had the adjective-less Spider-Man, where the Sinister Six came back, right? And so he did a pretty good job of putting that team together and manipulating them into doing the thing. There's a lot of crazy aspects about that. And I don't know if he did a good job, but I always have sort of a soft spot for that whole setup with him being a leader of like, he's the leader of the Spider-Man villains.
Right.
And to me, it still feels weird that he isn't the leader of the Spider-Man villains when it comes down to it. Norman Osborn has certainly surpassed him in that, in the years that have come. But I still kind of like him as he's a scientist, he's pretty powerful, he gets people together and, threatens Sandman into joining and stuff like that. He's got some chops, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. And
Not
he
evil
manages
enough,
he manages all four of those arms too. So that takes a team.
That is a lot of arms to work.
Yeah,
I can't use my regular arms, and they're part of my body normally. So definitely a lot of props to him for that. The other one that I thought of, and is Apocalypse. Apocalypse is a really interesting character to me.
Yeah.
Age of Apocalypse, we look at that, and to me, that's kind of my biggest feeling of Apocalypse now for me is Apocalypse then in the 90s with like he wins. He has the world, he's in control. And he sort of put together this group of sort of just modified versions of our heroes, right? And villains that work around him. And so I would say a lot of times the comics, I wonder about the fact that if you've been like working since the pyramids and have all this knowledge, why you're not better or more successful most of the time, personally. But like Apocalypse like got the job done then. He's done some interesting stuff too, Krakoa era and all that too. And so he is somebody that definitely has leadership aspects. I haven't seen him present a particularly great vision of why. He's just like the mutants will be the last thing, and you're like, all right, cool, because there's other people, spoilers, that do a better job. But I do think Apocalypse is a good leader. Can't say the same thing about Mr. Sinister. That guy, I don't know how anybody ever follows. He's doing a horrible job. But those are the two that came up on my honorable mention list. For villains, for heroes, was somebody that I thought about. Wouldn't put him on a list, but Vance Astro is a really interesting character to me.
Oh
Because
yeah.
Vance Astro in the future, he's leading. He's got this Captain America vibe and the Guardians of the Galaxy and that. I was going to say original, but not actually original. The 90s run of Guardians of the Galaxy, a really cool run, and really a one that kind of got it on the map a lot more. Really, really interesting leading that group of very different people in that. And, as Marvel Boy, he's done a decent amount of stuff, related to the New Warriors, being an Avenger. And so I do think there's a lot of leadership potential, both in the presence of whatever we call the present and sort of that future. And so I'd like to see him do more leadership overall, just because it seems like he's got that potential. And man, I don't know if you know the sort of Vance Astro's whole thing going to the future is like he's like an astronaut that goes a thousand years in suspension to get to a planet through the first one there. And then he gets there and they're like, we fixed that years ago. Everyone's here. You're just that weird astronaut we let sleep in suspension for 1,000 years. I will tell you, there would be expletives and I would not be helping any human. I'd be eviler than Dr. Doom if they did that to me personally, because that's just he was they shot him out, and then 5 minutes later they fixed the problem. They're like, just let him go for 1,000 years. No one really likes him here anyways. So dude impresses me. I would definitely say from that perspective. And yeah, he was the other one I had. He was the one I had for honorable mention for heroes at least.
Awesome list. You guys are really bringing it. Wow. Well, okay. So as I spoke earlier about this, I only made a regular list of just 5. And I have 3 honorable mentions just because the sheer number. I had one that I'd taken off, so I added him first. So my honorable mentions are going to start off with a character named Alexei Shostavaka. Yeah, that's what I said. And he is known as the Red Guardian. First appearing in Avengers 43 back in 1967. He is the Captain America of Russia. And so I'm not really putting him into a bad or a good category because of the way he's now being portrayed by David Harbour in the MCU. But I love the fact that as patriotic as Captain America is, he is just as patriotic for the Soviets, and he leads the Soviet super soldiers. The other one was called the Winter Guard. And then, I think he did a really good job of keeping those guys together. And then when the Soviet Union dissolved, he was still able to keep those guys together and, just again, did a good job. I thought he was a good leader. So the second honorable mention is going to be George Charlton. Does that ring any bells with you guys?
Jamie, you're really making me question my fandom right now.
No, Gordon got it. It's MODOK.
Okay.
All right, so
MODOK, really?
Yes, first showed up of Tales of Suspense number 94 in June 1967. It's a Kirby Lee Sinnott, Sam Rosen production, and it was part of they usually had 2 stories, and it was the backup story. And why am I picking MODOK? Honestly, I've got to say most of it has to do with the Hulu series where Patton Oswalt did the voice of it. Okay.
Really?
Yes, he's not a very good leader, but he's fun and he's funny. And that series, if you ever have the time to watch it, I mean, he has kids and they look just like him, and he gets fired from AIM, and he goes off to start his own company that just doesn't do the same. And I loved it. I love it a lot more than I liked what they did with the guy who played the Yellow Jacket in the Ant-Man series. You know how they put him in that just looked weird. But
yeah,
that was not pretty at all.
So I hope your third is Hit Monkey, since Hit Monkey's getting a second season.
Wait, is the podcast sponsored by Hulu?
No, it is not.
This is all Hulu. Jamie, all your answers are Hulu based. Give us our 10%, please. Thank you.
That's right.
I would definitely take a sponsor from Hulu. And my third honorable mention, I when I started making this list, I knew I wanted her on the list, but I didn't know where I'd put her. And after I did the whole thing, she ended up being an honorable mention, but she has to be named. And I am talking about Heather Hudson, wife of James Hudson, who eventually became a leader of Alpha Flight. Now, if you're not familiar with this story, she and her husband worked together in the group that uh, helped kind of do Canada's version of the X-Men. And she never was in the group. She was always kind of behind James and doing the scenes, doing all the electronics. But if you've read the comic, and it's spoiler alert for a 40-year-old comic, he eventually dies in an explosion. And Heather, instead of really coming back into her own, she and her teammates build a suit specifically for her, and she takes on the name Vindicator. So I chose her because I really liked the way that she didn't fold when she lost her husband. Obviously, it affected her, but she wanted to pick up that mantle. And as we know, sometimes people will do that and they just don't have the leadership skills. But Heather did, and she brought them against enemies like Dream Queen, Pestilence, Scramble, Mesmero, Atuma. No, it's not Atuma, and the Sentinels. So
Yeah,
that,
well, I love Steven
Good pick.
Seagal's '90s series too for Alpha Flight. That's a favorite of mine.
Yeah, but I read that from
remember-
number one.
Yeah, I remember that storyline actually from, with Guardian was on my list for a little bit. But she's definitely, so when you explain the arc for her, it reminds me a little bit of Pepper Potts.
Yeah.
And her becoming like Rescue, because she's the one behind Tony for a lot of times, and then eventually she moves into the spotlight.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I definitely thought she could, and I'll tell you, James never made it even close on my list. I didn't think he was a very good leader. I think by a lot of the early readings that he was just a bully, and he would get people together, and he was kind of short-tempered with people sometimes. The way he tried to get Wolverine back after he'd already joined the X-Men. So he almost without a doubt wouldn't have made this list, but Heather I thought was a very good leader. So
very strong Hank Pym vibes with James Hudson.
Yes, very much so. So all right.
Vibes. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. So those are our honorable mentions. Now we're ready to get into the real list of our favorites. Sy, we'll once again look at you and give us your fifth favorite Marvel leader. Two of them, actually.
Okay, two of them. So in the top five, we'll start with the heroes. Actually, you know what? We'll start with the villains, just because I think the villain choice is actually a little more fun. So top five villainous leader is the Wizard.
Who
leads the Fearsome Four, the Wizard, who I love Fantastic Four, and I loved watching the Wizard try and fail consistently to beat the Fantastic Four.
Right.
I appreciated the effort. I liked the fact that he tried. You knew he wasn't going to win. He very wily coyote in that way.
Yeah.
But he always put together a good team. The teams were always at least competitive, and it was fun to kind of see him match up power to power with the people that were in the in that villainous group. Right. And so that made it fun. I don't think he was foolish in what he tried to do. I just think he was unsuccessful for the most part, like a lot of villainous leaders. But if you put him into a corporation, he'd be a perfect middle manager. He'd be totally fine.
He'd have everybody
Twitter.
Yeah. He'd have everybody riding around those little anti-grav discs on the backs,
That's right. And then he'd wear the same helmet, same costume to work every day, but
that's striking helmet. Well, I mean, you saw him and you feared. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So
all right, good point. Good pick. What's your hero?
Number five hero. Might be a little surprising. Captain America. Number five hero.
Who's this guy?
He's
I've heard
America's
of Guardian,
version.
but Captain America, never heard of that guy.
Yeah, he's America's version of Red Guardian.
Oh,
so,
okay.
You might have heard of Red Guardian, but this guy, little known hero. And I think that he in the comics, I don't know if he gets to show a lot of those leadership traits that he kind of has. I think he's very good as what we sometimes refer to as servant leader. He never wants to put anybody in a position that he's not willing to be in himself, right?
True.
And he's always working hard to try to get things out of the way for others. But some of the other things that he's able to do, in terms of like planning, in terms of like, getting people excited about the mission, he's sometimes able to do that. I think in recent years, he's kind of got bogged down in the real life implications of representing America a little bit. And so the stories haven't always known how to use Captain America as a leader. I think sometimes the writers lean a little bit too hard on making him kind of a figurehead or somebody that has to get yelled at for the mistakes of the country in order to show that, like, people don't like militarism or something. But the character, I think, is a solid leader. And the good start to the top 5.
That's a good one. That's a good one. And you've got to stop saying top. It's killing me, man.
Sorry.
So I've got you racked up at $1.25 already. I'll shoot you my Venmo when we're done.
He's not a business professor. He cannot afford this.
All right, well, Gordon, what's your 5th favorite, let's say, hero villain?
So hero-wise,
leader.
My fave is Iron Man.
Oh,
I think Iron Man, I think in the comics is an interesting leader. I think some of those teams, of whether it's a West Coast Avenger or whether it's mainline Avengers, I think he does a decent job at times, but there also is a lot of weirdness about his secret identity. So you'll see all kinds of balloons related to, like, hopefully they don't realize I'm Tony Stark, which I think sort of his lack of authenticity, I think, is a problem in the comics at times. He's got kind of his own stuff going on. It's sort of weird when people are just complimenting the amazing Tony Stark and how great he is, and he's like, that guy is great. Like, and it's just an awkward situation for everyone. Which is why in the MCU, I just love, straight up, I'm Iron Man. We don't need to deal with this nonsense again. And that's why I'd actually argue MCU is a better leader. For Iron Man is a better leader in it. He really takes that important role and influences the team and what they're doing.
Yeah.
Not always perfectly, but certainly I think pretty well overall. So to me, he is somebody, and as a big Avengers fan over the course of my life, he's a leader I've seen quite a bit. But I do think that comic portrayal, there are certainly times when you're like, I don't know if he's helping as much. Like, I think anyone who basically says, hey, Avengers West Coast didn't work, let's become Force works, like, he probably should not be allowed to be a leader again. I'm gonna say that straight up. Like, who thought that was a good idea? I'm sure
Right.
Wonder Man didn't think it was a good idea at the end of the first issue. Certainly not. So.
That's a good pick. And I like that that's one of your favorites, because he has gone through so much in the comics, and they pretty much don't have that at all in the MCU, which makes him really a different leader, because in the comics he was horrible. I mean, just horrible, and everyone around him had to suffer for his narcissism and his ego. And I love the fact that sometimes he got slapped down, and but no, that's a great pick. I really like that.
And so my fifth on the supervillain list, is someone I think we can all agree is just a wonderful human being. And by human being, I mean Thanos. So Thanos, there's a lot of different ways to look at that. One thing that I was thinking for my list that got him sneaking on was Thanos Quest. So that the sort of 2-issue series that led into Infinity Gauntlet, where he gets the actual Infinity Gems. And I think it's actually a really interesting look at influence. And so Thanos, by going to all these Guardians that have this ring, that have all these gems, this amazing power, he's able to kind of use his influence, use his ability to, like, understand them, to basically manipulate them into basically losing to him when he shouldn't. Each of them has much more power. Even somebody like the Champion should be able to beat Thanos. But Thanos thinks better. He's able to really influence those. And I do think it's a nice example of sort of informal leadership, and that leadership's about influence. You don't have to be the boss. Nobody said Thanos is the boss, but Thanos has a lot of influence on what he has. Now, I think in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he kind of does act as a more traditional sort of leader. He's got these heralds and people that support him for some reason. But especially in the comics, it's kind of like, why would you support Thanos? His goal is just like to impress some chick.
Yeah.
And so there's no real value to you, right? There's like no value. You're like, let's kill half the earth. They're like, oh, so we'll be able to plunder or we'll get stuff. He's like, no, because death is hot, man. And so it's just like, like it's very hard to see him as a leader. I think after that they use him more. He does other stuff, but still, as a leader, I'm just like, who's going to follow him in the comics in a lot of ways? He's got kind of a philosophy in the MCU, not a particularly great, well-developed one in my mind, but at least, I guess he could grab some people on. So for a villain, he does that villain thing decently, and he is able to influence people mostly through manipulation and that type of thing, but still getting all those Infinity Gems and getting them from people at that point when it was harder back in the day to get Infinity Gems. To me, that makes him a pretty dang good leader and an interesting.
Yeah. Well, I've got to say that
you can't be kink shaming, Thanos. If he likes skeletons, just let him like skeletons, bro.
Yeah,
No,
love is love.
Love is love. I'm just saying you can't get someone else on board when it's like, I'm gonna get the hottest skeleton around. Yeah. Like, what about me, bro? Why should I help? Maybe she's got a friend. I don't know. Like that's the problem.
Well, I will say that for me, the most amazing leadership skill that he shows is the fact that he has these people following him, helping him put the gems and everything together, the stones, and every single one of them knows that they have a 50-50 shot of dying when he snaps his fingers too. So it's like, okay, yeah, let's do all this work for you, and we may not be alive afterwards. So that's for me is he's the master of the deal. So there we go. All right. Well, if I'm going to go ahead and throw mine down. Now, when I say Nicholas Joseph Fury, everyone thinks of Sam Jackson now. Okay. But before the Avengers Ultimates comic came out, he had been around for a long, long time. First introduced in May of 1960 as Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos. So my older brother, he was older by a couple of years, he had some of those comics. Our dad had served in Vietnam, and so I guess he ended up serving too. Not in Vietnam though, because he wasn't that old. But it was the way, first of all, where he took this group of people, including Tim Dum Dum Dugan and Lieutenant Happy Sawyer and others, and went out and fought just pretty much normal stuff. Okay. And then later on in the series is when things started to happen. He had stepped on a landmine, I believe it was, and that's when he lost his eye and ended up being inoculated with what's called the Infinity Formula, which I didn't remember that's how it happened until I reread that. And that is why in the comics, he doesn't nearly age as quickly as other people do. And so in 1968, they released Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. #1. And what this does is saying back in 1961, a group of intelligence agents all got together to form the Great Wheel of the Zodiac. And through a series of events, including them later being able to figure out how to make the LMDs, he ends up being the leader of this newly formed S.H.I.E.L.D. And again, that he's a great leader. He was able to get all of these people. And if you even look at the MCU version, so many people were loyal to him that, except the Hydra guys. And so that's just one of the ways that you could tell, he was an effective leader. And he has served through so many different roles. We all know about when Secret Wars came down, not the Secret Wars, the superhero act, where he was, against registration, but you got to do what you got to do when you're the leader of S.H.I.E.L.D. And I thought he's a very great, effective leader, whether it be on screen or in the comics. And of course, we all know Hasselhoff was the best.
Oh, absolutely.
Of course.
Well, and I'm impressed he's got a friend he calls Dum Dum and it never gets in trouble. And I'm sure Dum Dum's like, oh, that was my idea. I said call me Dum Dum.
Yeah, yes.
Thanks, Nick.
Do you see a difference between like how pre-Ultimate, like the Ultimate's Nick Fury is in comparison to the classic Nick Fury? Do you think maybe the Millar-isms, where he leans a little bit too much on being forceful in the Ultimates universe versus like in the original Steranko stuff, he's a little bit more spy type character?
Yes, I definitely agree with that. And it doesn't necessarily make it better or worse, but it is just a different approach to him. They never address, how he's been around, because he and Cap actually had some stuff in the comic books before Cap was lost at the end of the war. He met and worked with Logan, who would later become Wolverine. And so he's been around as long as they've been around and still looks the same. But I do think you're exactly correct. It wasn't until the Millar brought that group, which, by the way, those 13 issues are some of the best work that Marvel ever did. I was so excited after rereading those. But two different ways to show it, just like with Iron Man. You got one on screen and one on the page.
Well, I was going to say, too, there's the Nick Fury versus S.H.I.E.L.D. series from the late 80s, which I love. One of the first trade paperbacks I ever got, and sort of Nick being... he blows up S.H.I.E.L.D., right?
Yeah.
In that time, similar to how Captain America in the MCU steals his blowing up S.H.I.E.L.D.,
right?
Right? And so it's really interesting to see that. I also, when I think of Nick Fury, I think of LMDs and how, if you think Nick's done any bad leadership, it was one of the LMDs that probably...
Yeah, they did it. Yeah.
It ain't his fault. Just one of those stupid robots made a mistake.
But damn it, didn't he have an awesome flying car? Woof!
Absolutely. Those helicopters fell all the time now, especially in recent eras.
Good point. All right, well, we are now at our fourth favorite Marvel leaders. Cy, we're going to bounce it back to you, and why don't you give those to us?
All right, so we're going to go, we'll start with villain, I guess. So number 4 villain is Citizen V, aka Baron Zemo.
Yes.
And that's who Citizen V is? No.
Yeah, that's spoiler alert for 30. I don't know how old this comic is, but really,
I'm about to finish the first issue of the Thunderbolts. Please do not ruin that.
Yeah, don't. Sorry, you're right on the last page, and then you find out Citizen V.
Cool, man.
But
they're new.
I just love the. Yeah, they're brand new. I just love the audacity of specifically Citizen V doing and pulling the Thunderbolts plan and saying, like, hey, we're going to rebrand as heroes. We're going to go undercover. And I think it's just such a great, it's such a great story. It's so much fun. The comics, really are cool. I know they're doing an MCU version, but there's no way that you can get that same sensation from reading that first issue of Thunderbolts and you're like blown away and you're like, oh, wow, we're watching villains do this. And there's something great about that. I mean, I guess the Thunderbolts are going to be like the MCU's Dirty Dozen or Suicide Squad or something. Whatever. But it's not, there's something about the comics characters and the fact that he's able to convince everybody to go along with this, kind of cockamamie plan and, almost succeeds. I think it's kind of incredible. So really speaks to, and you'll notice Baron Zemo is okay, but Citizen V is really where it's at.
Yeah.
In terms of villainous folks at number 4. So,
and it's amazing how they were able to trick everybody into saying, "Hey, look, it's Ms. Marvel, and look, it's Wolverine." And nobody thought, "Well, wait, I thought he had 3 claws." Nope, he's always had 2. And just look over here.
Yeah, hey guys,
that's a good choice. I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. He was really great.
we have Wolverine at home. He only has 2 claws. That's what it is.
It's that whiskey claw that most Wolverines get after a few years.
After a few years, yeah. Yeah. All right, so top 4 heroic leader. Even though I love him in the movies, and he's probably my favorite leader in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he has ended up at this level just based on the comics. That's Black Panther. And I love Black Panther. I think he's a great leader. I mentioned earlier that there's some issues in his leadership that I think kind of bring him down a little bit in the comics. Number one, spending too much time having fun, going on adventures, hanging out with his wife. And if you're a good leader, you kind of have to balance those 2 things a little bit more. And then his kind of rivalry with Namor is another big reason why he's not higher on the list, right? Like if he's going to be a good leader, the thing that he does in the MCU that he definitely doesn't do in the comics is in the MCU, he offers Killmonger an opportunity to rehabilitate. He offers the MCU version of Baron Zemo an opportunity to rehabilitate. In the Marvel comics, he and Namor straight up hate each other and are just like willing to sacrifice anything, any people, any people that follow them just because they hate each other so much.
Right.
But I love the Black Panther character from the Kirby issues to the Priest comics to Don McGregor's run, and he's always been a very, very good leader. He's always been able to manage Wakanda relatively well, but I think that leadership has come under more scrutiny in the modern era about, well, how can you do all of this? How can you take all this time off and still be effective? What does it mean for you to be the Black Panther now? What does it mean in a modern sense to be the Black Panther? And some of the stories from Ta-Nehisi Coates really addresses that and tries to bring out the question of what makes him a good leader. And he's incredibly smart. I'll never forget some of the planning that he does in that 90s Priest run where he destabilizes the American economy. Just such a baller move for a king and a superhero to be able to do. So yeah, that's my number 4 choice.
That's a good choice, And one of the things that I really liked that they did in the MCU is they held Wakanda accountable for not being in any of the wars, just quietly staying back. Nobody even knew that was there, and kind of coming forward and now saying, okay, we have to have a place at the table. So I liked that aspect too.
Yeah.
But all right, great choice. Gordon, what's your number 4?
Well, so starting with supervillains, to me, number 4, you got to respect the man, Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom is one of those people, he's got the skill set. You need his help. He's the only one that can help. You don't want to go to him, but you have to.
Right.
And so I think Dr. Doom really encompasses kind of that villainous leadership to me pretty well. He's just that dang good in a lot of cases. And so when things go badly, you will turn to him for help. Will you pay? Yes. Might he betray you? Yes. But does he have a moral code? Yeah, he does, kind of. Will he help the world sometimes? Maybe. Yeah, as long as it fits his interest. And so I think he's a really interesting leader because, he can get a group together. He does sort of the Thanos parts like manipulation. But in the comics, I think he does a better job of kind of bringing people together and doing that. And we've seen him really over the spectrum in different types of ways of bringing groups together, avoiding that. Like Nick Fury, of course, he has his Doombots that can be blamed when anything goes wrong. So he's got a scapegoat ready to go. Yep. And so when we talk about villain-related leadership, to me, he's got a lot of those characteristics that I think work well. I think it does better than Thanos. Thanos is just so powerful on his own that, he can kind of do his own thing. He's smart. But Doom, a little bit lower power level, he can bring people together and do things, and I think that that's a little bit better. Not quite as good as the people later on my list, spoiler, but I think he's pretty good at it.
Well, cool. Well, all right, that's a great choice. I like that. All right, and your hero?
Number 4, a very controversial figure in our time, but Charles Xavier is at number 4 on my list. Now, I
Okay.
think Charles Xavier is really interesting because I also think he's very bad at a number of parts of leadership. So if you look at the old original X-Men issues, he's like giving people demerits. He's making them all wear the same costume, all this stuff that Wolverine would never ever do in his entire life. Right? But I think Xavier as somebody with a vision, right, is his vision has such impact on sort of where mutants are and what they do. This idea of peaceful coexistence, that transformational leadership is really big with Xavier. And I do think it's a disservice, as we've seen in the last, I don't know now, what, 20 years? We've seen a lot of like, oh, we need Xavier to be evil or have done bad things. I think
Yeah.
Xavier being kind of bad at being a field leader is enough of a bad thing often.
Yeah.
Let other people like Storm or Cyclops be in charge of the field team, or maybe even Gambit. What the heck? Um,
Oh, my
but
share.
as like a motivational person, as somebody to get you through the door, I think he's very good at that. You see that sort of various versions of him putting the X-Men together. I just read Joe Casey's Children of the Atom, and just was
Oh,
a
that's a
really
good one.
interesting to kind of look at that, getting the team together and thinking about, okay, him as not, old, kindly gentleman as we sometimes get, and is the version that I think led to a lot of the need for him to be like, oh, he actually did something evil, but rather someone who is angry, but also really is focused on that vision and what we need to do. And so
Yeah.
to me, Xavier does a lot of those big picture vision things first. I don't think he should be your field leader because I think he's mostly bad. And there's a lot of hilarious points in the comics where he comes back after X number of issues and starts treating people as children yet again. So like he should not be that field leader, but is like your public speaker, as your public face, as the person who inspires people to go to a very expensive private school in Westchester County. I think he does a great job. So that is
That's
why he is fourth on my list. I don't think Onslaught's a great leader, but you don't always hit a home run. Right? That's
no,
just how.
that was awesome. And I think Cassandra Nova would disagree with you on your choice, but luckily she's not on the show.
Well, we'll see if she is 3 on a list.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to bring for my number 4 someone that we've talked about already, Dr. Reed Richards, aka Mr. Fantastic. He, of course, led the Fantastic Four, the Future Foundation, and the Fantastic Five. If you've gone into the What If versions, which I loved, but he is basically considered the smartest man on Earth. He is a polymath with masteries in electrical, mechanical, aerospace, electronics, chemistry, physics, biology, and more. He was exposed along with his friend and girlfriend and her young brother to with cosmic rays to become the Fantastic Four. Now, first off, first thing every time to do to lead, um, he's he makes them all mutants basically, but it worked out for the good except for maybe for Ben. Okay, you got to give him a mulligan there. But then you start to look at some of the things that he's done throughout the years, and first of all, the Civil War. He was on the side of the Superhuman Registration Act, sure, because everybody knew who he was, and he wasn't worried about it. So for me, I was like, ugh, okay, that's not really that great either. And then you think about what he and the Illuminati did with the Hulk, with the best of intentions, but they just didn't have, the follow through. And I could go ahead and keep naming and naming and naming other things, Secret Invasion, but that's why I'm saying that the Reed Richards of those things is not my choice, but yet it is the ultimate zombie Reed Richards from the 3 issues of
Really?
yes, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because he was only worried about survival for he and his team. And he got in there, as we all know, by talking to another dimensional version of himself and showing him what a utopia they've created and managing to get them to come to him. I mean, like that's like the ultimate Uber Eats. You know, you have your food delivered.
Oh man.
And while it didn't quite work out for the group, I think that he was a pretty great leader for that. When you look at our worlds, Reed Richards, I mean, come on, the guy names himself Mr. Fantastic. You know, but
We don't know if there was like a poll that was taken and everyone said Mr. Fantastic is what we should go with.
Yeah.
I'm hoping there's an untold story where that was the case.
that would, yes,
Maybe.
okay. Maybe it was the scroll cows that were
Dude,
standing around.
maybe Doom did all the voting. He stuffed the ballot
Maybe.
because he thought Mr. Fantastic sounded the most pretentious.
Yes.
Didn't even give him the doctorate, right?
No,
So,
no, you know,
yeah.
I don't know,
Uh,
but
Can we also just say, since we've talked about Illuminati a little bit, can we say that the combined leadership of the Illuminati is like the worst?
yes,
Those
we
guys
definitely
never
can.
do anything right, right?
No,
Like,
no. Yet the
Plus, it's
cabal,
the responsibility too, right?
yeah, the cabal does a lot of things right. They almost get away with all of it. So, yeah, just because you're smart doesn't make you necessarily a good leader. So anyway, all right. Now we are at number 3. Cy, what you got?
all right. So, number 3 for villains, I have Doctor Doom, who I love from my years of reading Fantastic Four. The thing, the reason that he's not in the top, there are a couple of reasons. Number one, I think Gordon, you touched upon a couple of these things. Like, who knows what he's about? Like, he's about himself, but he's very flighty in some sense. Like, you could appeal to his, my ego. This person's appeal to my ego, so I will say, one such as Doom shall deign to do this, right? So he's like not necessarily committed to anything other than his own vanity in many ways. And then this is also part of the reason that like Fury isn't on my list, is these robots that he allows to like make decisions while he's away. If you're really a good leader, you're gonna find somebody that you can trust that is better than a Doombot. And the Doombots are just like they're there to like take the heat off of quote unquote bad decisions that he didn't make. I
use so many robots in my director jet. So many of them.
We always should just blame the robots, right? For our mistakes. But I think that's one of the limitations. I also think Doom like uses a lot of coercion. He's very forceful in his evil, which is good for a villain, not great for a leader. But still, he's able to take control, create plans, manage things better than most. Number 3 on my top 5 hero leaders list is Photon, who I think Gordon and I kind of agree might be the best leader of the Avengers, overall. So I think she's got great vision. She's always able to manage the team effectively. She's not the most powerful, but she's somebody that really does a great job with the team. And frankly, the issues of West Coast Avengers when she's running the team are some of my favorite ones. And I think she does a really good job of managing a really interesting group of personalities and challenging folks that maybe not the most powerful team of Avengers ever, but I think she does a great job of managing them. So she's really great. The MCU version hasn't had a chance to lead anybody yet. And I'm hoping she gets the opportunity, because I think that actress is incredible. I think she's really good. I think she would do a great job leading the Avengers. So hopefully, note to Marvel, let Photon lead the way. Let her lead the team of Avengers. I think there'll be a lot of fun. So that's my third choice.
Okay, I like that. And so that's the Monica Rambeau Photon, right?
Yes,
okay.
Monica Rambeau Photon.
Yeah, and she did same thing. She had a couple of different names as well.
Yeah.
But the Photon was the kind of the black and white outfit, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. That's a good one. I like that. And I do like her in the MCU. I can't wait to see more of it, So, all right, Gordo, let's hear it.
Okay, so we're talking about third on the villain list.
Yes.
And we're gonna go with Baron Zemo. Not Citizen V. Citizen V was always a fake thing by Baron. The Baron is the real person. Okay, so what's great about Baron Zemo that hasn't been stated? most of the things I will have to say. So let's go. First, the tragic death of his father. His father, just trying to do his crazy living in South Americanness, dies, and he doesn't have that father figure that he needs. But he still says, "I will get vengeance." I respect that. I respect vengeance when it is necessary. And so he puts together the various Masters of Evil team, right? Including the one for the siege on Avenger Mansion, right? One of the best highlights of Avenger issues overall, a highlight of the Stern run. What does Baron Zemo say? How do we beat the Avengers? Get so many villains, get Blackout to keep other heroes out, and then we hit them really, really, really hard.
Right.
Now, a lot of times villains have this basic plan, right? But they underestimate the heroes very significantly. They think their power levels are so much better. But Baron Zemo says, I'm going to respect them to the degree that I'm going to have way too many people on this team, right? I'm going to make sure no one else can come in and help. And it is one of the biggest defeats that the Avengers have during parts of that storyline before they win at the end, right? Is because he has appropriately put resources towards the goal that needs to be there. So as Baron Zemo through the Masters of Evil, I would say that he does a great job of thinking as a leader. Now, the Thunderbolts, Cy mentioned quite a bit about that. The one thing I will say about the Thunderbolts that I do think is interesting that wasn't mentioned is he has this idea, he puts them together. It's a great plan. Maybe, I don't know exactly where they're going. There's some questions of that. But the Thunderbolts say, hey, I want to be heroes. And so Baron Zemo gets, kicked out, basically, right? It doesn't quite work. And a lot of times when that happens, a leader just goes away, or, maybe they form their own company to try to defeat them, whatever it is. But what does Baron Zemo do? Well, over time, he ends up being leader of the Thunderbolts again, right? They've got a new mission, a new setup, and he can still have big impact. And so when you look at that series around the 90th issue, 100th issue, basically he gets back in there. The heroes aren't sure whether they think he's got to be bad, but he's done good things, and they don't know what to do about it. And so this is a guy that got basically kicked out, that they're all, he's evil, we're good. And some of those people stayed good, but he's still working with Songbird and all this in that time period. So he's adapted. Adaptability in leadership is a crucial thing. And so to me, that really shows a little bit of that. He's had that arc. He's led in different ways of that. And to me, it's not just being Citizen V, it's the overall ability of him to really be adaptable and do this. So, cool dude. You might not want to hang out with him necessarily. But I think as a leader, he's actually had a lot of impact in different environments. He's not a one-trick pony to mine.
Yeah. It's definitely a guy who sticks around, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Because his mask is stuck to his face with glue, right?
That is one way to stick around, and he definitely does that as well. So that is an important aspect. So he's my
Sorry, I had to do it.
That's all right. I didn't do my prep on how people put their mask on. Jamie, I am sorry. I plan to do that. But it just
I think that's one of his things, is that at some point there was an adhesive that was sprayed on him by someone else, and they put that mask on him and couldn't take it off.
Yeah, good old glue face.
No, I remember that. Yeah, I actually did read that. Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, that was back in the day, but still.
A great time. So number 3 on my list, a native of Louisiana, Monica Rambeau. Captain Marvel to me, the only Captain Marvel, although the other Captain Marvel's got a pretty dang big profile, but still, Monica is my Captain Marvel. And so I think Cy said a lot of useful things literally seconds ago, which is not a great way to have discussed something. As somebody else already mentioned it person moments ago. The one thing I will note that I do really like is this is not Captain America being in charge of the team, right? Captain America is somebody that everyone is their hero. He shows up 20 years later. He's pretty mopey if you read any of those early issues of the Avengers. But he is still somebody that, like, that's Captain Marvel, man. That's Captain Marvel. Yeah, Captain America, Captain America, right? But Captain Marvel is a rookie. She starts up on the team as a provisional member. And from that, she rises the ranks to be the leader of the Avengers. I want to say the premier team of superheroes, but let's be real, the X-Men, were certainly number one in everyone's heart at that time.
It's got to be Mystery Men.
Even if the Avengers were number one in my heart the whole time, still. But it's certainly a huge accomplishment to leading that team in a great era for the Avengers, and influencing those people not as, oh, you're a god or you are this famous superhero. You were somebody that was a trainee last week, and now you're leading this team for a pretty darn good team. And then ultimately somebody who only her leadership journey there kind of ended due to editorial politics and all that with that setup as they were changing that team over to the next era. Something that Stern wasn't particularly happy about. So to me, I think she does a great job with that team. Sy said a lot of good stuff on it, but that part of being a rookie and being somebody who makes impact. And I think that's actually true in a lot of cases of leaders, right? Is that somebody who becomes a leader because they're willing to step up and put in the work, and they've got the willingness to do so and the confidence to be like, I will try, I will do that. Because we don't have enough of that in a lot of cases. People stick back. And so I respect that a lot from her in that case.
Yeah. Go Louisiana.
Absolutely. Everyone else on the list is in Louisianian, so be ready.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you got her, you got Gambit, you got Brother Voodoo. We got plenty of
Gambit didn't make the list. I'm sorry. Brother Voodoo probably should have.
All right. Well, for my number 3, it is someone that we just finished talking about, Captain America. But now, for all of the things that y'all said about how he is moody and, you know, how things have changed, how it's become, I'm not talking about the Captain America from the comics of today. I specifically am focused on Captain America when he worked and led the Invaders during World War II. Now, this comes out because that was a comic that I remember reading, like every, you know, you'd go out and get them at every month at the K&B, the little circular comic wheel. And I just love the way that Infantino drew it, especially the Toro and the Human Torch and Namor. I mean, it was cool to see him. They all got together to oppose the Nazis, and you know, go Nazis, killers, bacon, whatever. So
don't leave a pause there.
Yeah, don't leave a pause there.
We're off the podcast at the pause.
Yeah. But I thought
we were a little too positive on Baron Zemo earlier, so we gotta take a step back.
Yeah, we need to move in a different direction. If Red Skull's everyone's number one, I'm gonna be really disappointed.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the ones that I focus on. You know, they did some direct things. First starting out when they got together to save Prime Minister Winston Churchill from the Master Man, and he's actually the one that, you know, said maybe you guys should work together to help us. And I just thought it was a cool group. Every time I laugh like a third grader when I say wizard, but you know, it's a cool group. So
fair.
Now Cap is also a great leader in the Ultimates, I believe, because he doesn't have all of that other baggage. It seems like, you know, he's born to lead in that series, and it kind of goes, you know, on its own after, you know, volumes 2 and 3. But boy, those original issues keep going back. That is some of the best written and illustrated of any of the Marvels. So anyway, that's going to be my number 3, Steve Rogers leading the Invaders during World War II against those horrible Nazis. Because we don't like them.
That's controversial, but we'll
Does he actually punch Hitler in the nose in the Invaders series, or is it only on that one cover?
That's only on the one comic, you know. But he does it in the movie a lot. So.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's take a pause real quick, and I would love for you guys to take the front stage and tell us about your project and the books about Marvel leadership.
So we, you know, our book is kind of like this conversation that we're having right now about the comics and leadership, except we're explicitly talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Okay. You know, both of us are professors. You know, we both do some training and development, leadership development on the side with organizations as well. And one of the things that we found is that metaphor examples, both in class and in the training room, is really useful to help people become leaders. And one of the things that we've done, and I'll let Gordon talk about this, is we've conceptualized leadership in a way that allows everybody to be or to view themselves as a leader. So, Gordon, do you want to define leadership for everybody?
Yeah, so we talk about leadership as a process. So leadership as a process of influence. So essentially, you're changing the behaviors, the attitudes, the thoughts someone else will have. And so we look at it in that way because leaders aren't always going to be somebody with a fancy title or an official role. We're often influenced by a lot of people in our life that maybe don't have that. And so we kind of think about that, especially with how we teach leadership in our classes, as well as through the book, of that you've got people that may not have a formal role, but have a lot of impact on others. And that's really, you as a person can have a lot of impact on other people, even if you don't have that special role. And so we really focus the book on that, of having you think about and reflecting on your own leadership experiences, thinking about examples from the Marvel movies, and then learning about these various research supported leadership concepts, but explained in a way where they are clear and understandable, and focused, kind of use these good examples. And so that's kind of the goal that we had for the book, is to make something like this, with Marvel Cinematic Universe being one where a lot of people are familiar with it. We all have various opinions or hot takes on what's going on in that universe. And so it allows you to kind of think about these things when it might be a lot harder to think about, well, is my boss a good boss, and why? Am I a good leader, and why? But to say, in the Civil War, how did Captain America and Iron Man come into conflict? Was that a good way to resolve it, or what went wrong?
Right.
Is often easier to do and kind of more fun, I would argue.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
does your, I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead, Jamie.
Does your book look at both villain and heroes from the cinematic universe, or do you focus just on the hero aspect?
I believe mostly the heroes. We do talk a little bit about different types of leadership powers that people have, and when we're talking about something like coercive power, you can see certain leaders use coercion, and most of those are villainous leaders. There's always a question. I don't know if you ever follow these conversations about, oh, where do villains get henchmen from, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the question becomes like, oh, a lot of them are coerced, or they're stuck in a situation where they have to follow somebody to try to make money, or they align with the mission of the leader in some way that they actually want to say, like, okay, I'm going to follow this villain. Or you just happen to be a Chitauri that is drafted by Thanos and sent to Loki on Earth, and you're just like doing stuff, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, we talk a lot about that. And one of the things we found is using these examples. People love talking about the movies, right? And they love the pop culture. And it's sometimes hard for people to disassociate a little bit from their own work lives to really analyze what leadership is. But you can argue about what makes Captain America a good leader, what makes Iron Man a good leader. And that it's safe, right? Like Steve Rogers isn't going to pop up behind you and be like, hey, buddy, what did you just say about me? And you can use that analogy to kind of understand your own leadership, and you can actually see it. One of the things that I've been able to do is I use some of the clips in my training programs when I talk about leadership skills, and people will watch like a clip of Steve Rogers having a conversation and kind of messing up some language when he's talking to Peggy Carter, calling her dame when he doesn't mean to, and then correcting himself, and then messing up again and trying to correct himself, and building that connection. And people see that and they're like, oh, okay, he's making a mistake, but he's acknowledging it, he's owning up to it, he's accountable. Maybe I need to do something like that in my own life. And that's what makes it such a potent example for people, whether that's in class or whether that's in a formal leadership training.
Yeah. And we all are human. We all make mistakes, but one of the things is like you just said, owning it and then not trying to do it again. I mean, sometimes it's all about intent. So he didn't have the intent to insult her, and once he learned it, he probably never did it again. But that's great. Well, where can people find and buy your books?
Amazon mostly.
Yeah, Amazon's
Any
probably
place where
the
books
best
are
one.
sold. You can find it. So we have one book about the Marvel Cinematic Universe that's called Leaders Assemble: Leadership in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We just finished another book about leadership in Avatar: The Last Airbender that's coming out in November. So that's available for pre-order now. That's called The Elements of Leadership. Leadership lessons from Avatar: The Last Airbender. So and we've also written a little bit for another Marvel related property, Spider-Man Psychology. We wrote a chapter about mentorship in that. So
Yeah, and we also do some
stuff.
blogging too through talentmetrics.io, size consulting firm website. So we've talked about all kinds of pop culture examples. We've talked about when the book was written before the TV series is, and so the TV series have actually inspired quite a few posts. So if you want to know why Loki was so unsuccessful in season 2 of Loki, I would recommend reading our blog post on that topic. We talked about
Okay. And we'll have links to all of that in the show notes for this episode. Any plans to do DC?
I think we're recovering from the last
So there's two parts of that. One, comics wise, DC, I'd love to do stuff on the DC universe, although there is comics always actually make me a little more nervous, honestly, compared to the movies, because the movies are, you might not think of the Marvel universe as small in terms of the movies, but it is a finite set.
Right.
I always feel like when we talk about comics, people will bust out. And you're like, well, in Batman 147,
On page
clearly you're wrong.
14.
I'll be like, man, I didn't read Batman 1. Which 147? They keep rebooting the numbers. I have no idea what 147 you even mean anymore. And so with DC, I think comics would be fun, but there's all kinds of stuff, whether it's, the post-rebirth era, whether you've got, is it what time period, that to me makes it a little more amorphous. Well, with the book, we can be like, we're talking about the Black Panther movie. Here's what happened in the movie. We all watched it, for 2 hours and 35 minutes or whatever. While with the books, there's just so much lore and all that with. I don't want to do the DC movies because I don't like them. Mostly,
I like
sorry. And Cy likes the Snyder movies, so that would be the weirdest book ever for us to write, because I don't know what I would write. I'd probably write something derogatory, and then Cy would have to correct it so we don't get hunted down by Snyder fans like himself. So I don't know. Maybe James Gunn version of the DCU will be so exciting that it'll be successful and we'll be ready to write on it.
Yeah,
But
that's gonna happen.
yeah, I hope, I'm hopeful. To me, the source material for Marvel comics and DC comics are as good. There's as many great characters and great storylines out there. Have they been translated as well? Well, the MCU is a bit of a miracle that it's been as consistently good as it has been. But I would love for DC to be. I also would write a book on the Image superhero universe. That would be interesting. I'd have to start reading some more of those comics, and we would also definitely do one on the Malibu Ultraverse.
Ultraverse,
because we actually both love the Ultraverse. It's been a while, but I will read those comics if necessary to write a book. No one will buy the book, but I will read them again.
If Marvel wants us to reboot the Ultraverse, I think we're open to that as well. So I'm just gonna speak that into the universe.
We need an illustrator because we cannot draw.
No, I can only do stick figures. But if Marvel, give me a call. I'm happy to get through the legal rights and just write some Ultraverse books. I'm a big fan of Firearm, Prime, any of those characters.
Right.
Yes. I don't know if we're the best team for Mantra, but Mantra I love. We'll take Prototype if necessary.
Yeah, there we go.
And Sludge would be fun. I don't know how you follow up Steve Gerber. The Strangers as well. So
great book. Yeah.
Audience, I'm sure you love these series as much as we do. So feel free to chime in at any time with us on the Twitter.
All right. Well, with that, let's get on. Cy, what is your penultimate choice for that's my word for Marvel villain and Marvel superhero leader?
Jamie was not ready for the Ultraverse today. He's just
I
was too late to talk about the Ultraverse.
Listen, next up is CrossGen, and then we're really out in the woods.
Or
Valiant,
some of those.
So a lot of these are going to be from very similar, but I gotta say my penultimate villain is somebody that a lot of people think is right now, and that's Magneto. Magneto, great leader, great vision, powerful enough to enact that vision, powerful enough to create his own asteroid, powerful enough to try to create, to support Genosha, somebody that everybody can look to. People respect him. People know what he's been through. He is respected enough that his enemy or frenemy, whatever you want to call him, puts him in charge of his school. And he's able to go from villain to hero, and he's able to kind of lead in both of those contexts.
Is that just Xavier making another bad choice, though? Just like sending those kids to Krakoa.
That might be another bad
or Darwin,
choice on his part.
Okay, go.
But there's but there's an argument to be made that he is the most clear-sighted of the mutants, right? That he, because of his experiences during the Holocaust, that he can see what a lot of the other people can't. His complaint against Xavier is always that you're too, you're much too rosy in your perspective. Xavier, may or may not be on my list, but I think Magneto really is on a lot of levels. Like, he's able to build an organization. He doesn't have a lot of money, right? So he's just got commitment from his team members, from the people that are in his group. He's able to bring something when he goes to Xavier's mansion. He brings something to the table as a leader. He brings an edge that's actually necessary during those stories, during the trial of Magneto. And he's really about speaking truth to power, where Xavier in many ways is, trying to calm people down and trying to kind of say, like, hey, we can all live together. We don't need to worry about the stuff that you've done to our people as much, but we can live together. Magneto comes out and he's like, no, we need to talk about this. We need to address this. And we can't have equality, or we can't share the planet until we've kind of gotten these reparations, right? Which actually leads into my second choice for heroes, and that is somebody who goes on the reverse arc from Magneto, and that's Cyclops. Cyclops, who, interestingly enough, when I was a kid, I hated Cyclops. When I was kid in the 80s and 90s, Cyclops is a huge dork. What a dweeb, right? Like, who likes him? Why would Jean Grey ever want to be with a guy like Cyclops? What a doofus.
I hope he's not listening to this episode right now.
He's used to
Scott,
this.
I love you, Scott. You're not on my list, but I love you, buddy.
I love Scott now. Cyclops is incredible. Absolutely incredible leader. And I'll use an example from the comics where he talks about, he has a conversation with another character, and they say, hey, so what's plan B? And he says, it's plan 2, because the letter B implies that we only have 26. And so he becomes like the ultimate planner. He puts forward plan after plan after plan. He is able to kind of look at Xavier and Magneto. He's able to kind of merge those two those two visions together and say, hey, we've got, we need to come up with something that's not totally Xavier and not totally Magneto, but something else. And so in the modern era of X-Men comics, I think he is he's a very, very strong leader, and he's grown in that sense. Like, he went through this process of saying, like, of reevaluating his own beliefs and saying, hey, do I really agree with this guy? Do I really agree with Xavier? All the stuff he's done, all the minds that he's manipulated, like, can I really be behind this? And he ends up being and salvaging that dream and bringing it forward. So all the stuff that Gordon mentioned about, like, oh, Xavier is this figurehead, Cyclops is the guy that makes it happen. He's the one. Sure, you can have this vision. He's the one who's going to implement it and make that happen.
Okay, because you said a lot. And I again, it's a show about favorites. So I love, what you're saying. I think he's just not really a good leader, because he lets so much of his own emotions out through it. And I'm talking about, I'm doing a rewatch of X-Men the 97 prequel to the new 97. And I remember going back and reading like the original ones and stuff, and he was just always a jerk. He's like, look, I'm the hall monitor, you've got to listen to me. And I never really saw him as a good leader. I just saw him as the leader. And many other times people would step up. Storm, for example, step up. I thought she was an excellent leader for the X-Men. I just, he was a little pompous. He was a teacher's pet. And yes, later on, and I haven't read most of those, but later on with the whole Genosha and, then later on with the Phoenix Force, he did step up, but those original ones, I just can't get behind him.
But you see the shift in the character, right? Like he is a hall monitor. He is annoying as hell in those early issues. There's no reason to like want to lead him. And of course, you like Wolverine. Wolverine is cool. He's not up in your business. But the tenor of X-Men in the modern era, in like the last 25 years, especially in the like Morrison, Hickman, era, right? That era is really a Cyclops era. Right, where and it's wild to think about. You can actually see that. I don't know if you've seen X-Men 97 yet, but X-Men 97 really shows you the good side of Cyclops. Cyclops gets incredible fight scenes, and he gets some incredible moments of leadership. And he's the guy who is he's a hard ass, but he's in the he's in the danger room. He's doing the training. He's a great field leader too, which Xavier doesn't have. And I think that puts him above a lot of other leaders. And the modern era of Cyclops is really the one I'm talking about, more so than like the guy that we know in the blue costume and the, I'm talking, modern era, the cross-eyed, with the X Cyclops. Yeah. Modern era now, who's got every plan, who is, in fact, some of his best moments are speaking truth to power to Xavier, to Magneto, and people are getting behind him because he's disillusioned. Right, he's disillusioned in a way that like all these other folks are not, and he's able to present a new vision, present something different, and that might be the thing that really saved the character. Because you're right, all that like boyish emotions that he has, once he basically has a throuple with him and Wolverine and Jean Grey, things really open up. For him. So that's what I'm not advocating for throuples, but it works for Scott.
I'm not saying no, but
his number one on the list is a throuple. You could just tell him.
Wow, this podcast took a turn. Woo!
This is all getting at Cy. You lost your number two.
Hey, it's only going to play in New Orleans, all right? It's the only place that'll accept this particular part of the podcast.
I'm in northern Louisiana, sir.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Splash some water in my face. All right, let's move on.
Okay. All right. So I'm not sure how I can top most of that, and don't want to necessarily. But I'll tell you, number two villain. A guy, I got to respect him, a self-made man, I think. I don't think he's a Nepo baby as far as I know. The Kingpin. The Kingpin, Wilson Fisk. Somebody who, his origin, right? Spider-Man retires for, it appears to be about 5 minutes, but it's about 5 pages, I think. And he's like, I'm going to take over all the gangs in this moment. He's somebody with a plan that's ready to go on contingency, right? That's what strategic planning is. Where is the niche? Where is there an issue? And he's all ready to go. That's actually something we can look at a lot about adaptive leadership and creativity is you are prepared. He's done the planning, and it becomes this big thorn in the side of Spider-Man. It becomes a big thorn in the side of course, Daredevil the most. And we even lead up to him in Daredevil 300, losing everything, right? Being kicked out of that. What does he do? Reinvents himself. Different ways, depending on what you're doing. They do have him for his weight. And he's like, no, I am going to put together this organization and do it, right? He's got loyal members. He's got all this. He organizes it very well. And this is a huge organization, right? We're not talking about a few mutants. We're not talking about Xavier with a few children in matching outfits. This is organizing all the gangs of Marvel New York, which is almost as dangerous as 70s, 80s actual New York. That is where it's at. And so to me, I think Kingpin really is an interesting character with that. You even have sort of some of that mutual respect with him and Daredevil a little bit when he is somebody who's the opposite of what Daredevil's doing. He's not somebody you want to be against you in any significant way. And of course, very interesting character as well in TV too. But the Kingpin's certainly somebody I think of as somebody who leads, who does things, who has impact, and somebody that's been defeated and come back stronger, leading an org. And that's a lot easier than being, I'm Dr. Octopus, I got sent to jail, I'm going to escape and do it again. This is like, I'm going to rebuild my organization, I'm going to use my contacts to be successful.
Gotcha.
So Kingpin, good job with your criminal empire, is my feeling of.
All right. Well, all right. So what about your
hero? Really an obvious choice, Squirrel Girl. Squirrel Girl is my number 2. If you've read any of Ryan North's Squirrel Girl series, one of the most interesting things in that is really creating a space around Squirrel Girl. Yes, she's somebody that Dr. Doom grudgingly respects. And why is that? Because of her relationship building, her positive attitude, her ability to keep going and keep working. And so you'll see within the series herself, she's got her other computer science buddies, other more obscure superheroes that she works with, that she's able to get sort of the best out of them. She prefers to not fight, but to get people on the same page. And we see her accomplishing a whole huge amount of stuff because of that type of perspective. I think in the Marvel Universe, it's even a bigger thing because of how much Fisticuffs is the way that things get done. Squirrel Girl does a lot better idea of, even with Fisticuffs, getting to a place where both parties feel respect for each other and all of that. And so to me, Squirrel Girl is a very interesting character overall, but as a leader, she actually motivates people quite a bit because people trust her. She looks for the best in them, and she helps provide to them to be successful. Even her evil doppelganger becomes a good character as well. Literally reforming your evil doppelganger is something that you just don't see very often in real life or comics. So props to Squirrel Girl, my number 2.
Wow. And can we all agree that Melania should be Squirrel Girl in the MCU?
I'd go for it.
Yeah. I mean, she literally showed up in costume before. I think she should do it. Yeah. All right. Well, I am doing a quick shuffle of my number 2. And it originally was Victor Von Doom, Dr. Doom, the leader of Latveria. And y'all covered it so well that I'm not even going to do that. So I'm going to do a quick change. And I am going to choose Storm from the X-Men, but specifically when Storm led the Morlocks. Okay, because as we know, she had lost her powers from Forge's weapon based on a neutralizer, and she thought, she pretty much had lost everything, and so she was able to bring herself back up together and go and turn this group of scavengers and thieves and whatnot into a more productive society. And when she beat Callisto for the leadership, she didn't kill her like you're supposed to, and she made that a lot of respect from both Callisto and from the Morlocks who were around there. Of course, she isn't in residence with them, but she is still the leader of the Morlocks. And I know that there's some of the stuff that happens in, I think, 97, X-Men 97 series. I don't know if they followed it up with more, but I know they had the original one. And I always just thought she was very great, and then of course she becomes a good leader for the X-Men teams, and then a good co-ruler for Latveria. Sorry, Wakanda. Yeah, Wakanda Forever.
That would be interesting still.
Yeah, still.
There'd be some drama in the Illuminati if that happened.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to say that she was just a strong individual, strong leader with or without powers. So I'm going to go with number 2. That's my penultimate choice.
Great choice.
All right. Drum roll. We are now at your favorite Marvel leaders, both good and evil. Sy,
All right, so I'm going to piggyback off of what you said because my number one is Storm from the
Oh,
hero's side. It is Storm. And it is actually, so there's a couple reasons why. Number one, she doesn't need her Omega level mutant powers to lead, right? I don't think people would listen to Magneto if he wasn't an Omega level mutant, right? If he loses his powers, he's not pulling a Storm and he's not going to lead the Morlocks. And she eventually led the X-Men without powers,
right.
which is really speaks to her, to all of her other leadership abilities, her relationship building, her, task orientation, her ability to like organize the actual work to get things done. But the really interesting thing is she not only doesn't have to have powers to be a leader, but in her marriage to T'Challa and as a leader in Wakanda, she didn't even have to have a formal title to exercise that leadership capability. Her presence alone, her social skills alone are enough for her to really take charge of that leadership role. And so that's why she's my number one, because not only is she an Omega level mutant and she can throw down if she has to, she doesn't even need to, because as a leader, she can coordinate everybody else. You can get that done. And then my villainous leader is somebody who Gordon just talked about, which is Kingpin. And the reason I think Kingpin is the best leader is because he wins, right? He's the only, villain on my list that beat his hero, like thoroughly beat his hero, right? And then even after he lost, rebuilt himself, as Gordon mentioned, in a way that actually shows that, yeah, he's got leadership capabilities. He knows how to manage. He knows how to like reorganize, to rebuild. And frankly, he has some power, right? Like he's definitely like peak human, physical skill. But, it's not just all intimidation. There's somebody on this list or on any of these lists, and I don't know if they're going to show up, if he's going to show up on somebody else's list. There's a character in the Marvel Universe called the Leader, and not a leader at all. No. He's a manipulator. He's is very good scientist, all these things, right? But the Kingpin has all of those leadership capabilities. He's able to manage villainous relationships. He's able to manage relationships with Daredevil, right? He's able to, at certain points, come to like peaceful terms with Daredevil to operate without, Daredevil bothering him or even other heroes bothering him. So he has those capabilities, and that really sets him apart. And he wins sometimes, and it's not like a Doom level victory where Doom aids the hero in the victory that he has, or Doom wins and then something like when he gets the Beyonder's powers, it turns out to be like a bad choice. He really can like straight up win. So that's why he's my number one choice for villainous leader.
Two excellent choices. All right, Gordon, what you got?
Okay. So villain wise, I got to go with Magneto for this. And so I'll try not to be too repetitive on other things. But I do think with Magneto, it's again, like Xavier to some degree, but this idea of a vision that really appeals. And that's actually something where I think the Fox X-Men movies does a great job of kind of showing that appeal of Magneto's vision of, for mutants, there's different paths, but one of those paths is we have the power and we're in control. And so I think there is the positive elements, Sy talks about, and, we're placating these humans that are trying to kill us, parts that can be problematic for Xavier. But Magneto, even from the evil perspective, right? It's like the dark side of the Force perspective. He's like, you have these amazing powers. You should be using them for your benefit. Then these people hate you. Why would you protect them? And it's a very appealing vision for a lot of people. This is a dude that can call his organization the Evil Brotherhood of Mutants. And people are like, I'm still signing up, right?
Yeah.
Marketing 101 would say, don't call your group evil. But he's like, I don't care. I'm going to flex. You're going to want to be part of this group. And so he puts together multiple of these types of groups. He offers that alternative. And honestly, I think his ability to influence is so good that even now we see like, oh, Xavier gave him his school. He was a good choice. No, he's Magneto, man. You can't trust that dude. He's charismatic. He is evil. He only cares about himself when it comes down to it. He's got a great origin story to make you sympathetic. But when it comes down to it, You let Magneto in charge, the Earth will burn. There will be war between humans and mutants. And the fact that we're now at a time when people are like, Magneto is the cooler one, he's the one with the real vision, just shows how good of a leader he is, despite being an evil mutant now, in the past, and in the future. Thank you very much.
And he's got such beautiful hair.
Beautiful hair.
That's the real source of his charisma, like Samson. He goes bald like Xavier, it's over.
It's over.
Absolutely. No, Xavier needs better hair. I've always argued that.
Yeah.
That's why he's lower on the list. So I'm not sure how I can follow up that impassioned plea, but I will start with my number one for hero is Black Panther. So why Black Panther? Well, I do think, the Marvel version, the movie version we've talked about a little bit, really good at bringing people together. But I actually think it's really interesting, the Black Panther version, especially of Christopher Priest's version in the comics, where he's really playing a game well beyond other nations, other leaders in a very significant way. And so, as I talked about with some other people, Kingpin running a whole criminal organization and all this and rebuilding, dude, Black Panther's running a whole nation that is a small nation compared to others. It may have advanced technology, but he is, he's showing up the United States and the rest of the world all the time in that Christopher Priest series. He has 10 steps of everyone. He's got a very pragmatic view of what he's doing. And he makes sense if you talk about, oh, he's hanging out with the Avengers all the time. And in that series, they're like, yeah, because he's kind of spying on them because he thinks that they're going to be a threat to Wakanda. He is just somebody that's so many moves ahead and really willing to work with people, see the best in them, even though he also is Mr. Realpolitik. And so that's something where some of those portrayals, and I think Illuminati being one where I don't like a lot of the portrayals of the characters in it, where I think with Black Panther, it just doesn't fit with a lot of how he tends to roll and what he's doing. It's just a bad situation to be. Somebody like Namor, I can kind of understand them going along. But dude, Namor is a big individual as well, where I feel like you wouldn't hang out with these guys. And Black Panther even more, where it's just so obvious that this is a problem. Maybe Reed, maybe Tony, they can believe in their hype enough. But I think Black Panther would have had a great contingency plan or 5 that would have been a lot better than sending Hulk into space.
Yeah.
And this is while dealing with a lot of complex differences of culture and other areas with his own country at that time, and dealing with just different dynamics. And I think that's something the movie hits some of that well, of different tribes with different goals and all these politics. Like Black Panther is the closest to a real world leader that has to do a bunch of these things. Doctor Doom with Latveria, I don't know what they put in the water in Latveria, but like those people are not concerned nearly enough with what's going on. Black Panther's area is actually a very complicated nation of people that don't necessarily agree, and he does a very good job of managing that. While the rest of the world wants to invade that as well. We've seen some interesting discussion that too. So still number one. T'Challa's still number one on my list as the best leader.
That's a great choice. It really is. He's a great leader. So I'm very excited to share my number one with you guys because we have not talked about this guy at all. I am talking about this hero came out in 1979. He had a total of 79 issues, including the 4 annuals, written by Bill Mantlo and illustrated by Sal Buscema. I'm talking about Rom the Space Knight.
Of course.
Wait a minute. We're going to Rom Space Knight. Oh, I did not expect that. Okay.
Yeah. Well, if you look behind me,
I could get
a little bit of a Rom.
Okay. All right. I'm very happy about
there
the
whole time.
Yeah, the whole time.
I'm very happy about this choice. Okay.
Oh, good.
Let's hear about Rom.
So Rom, was a member of the Galdorian race, and he, their whole world, Galdor, was beset by the dire wraiths, and they're a race of shapeshifters, and they have both a science group and a sorcery group, and they would go from world to world, kind of like Galactus, and they take over everything, all of its resources, and then move on. So the government pretty asked for volunteers. Basically, they had to sacrifice their humanity and were put into these suits of armor. And it's not like Tony Stark could take it off at any time. Rom was the very first one, and he was the leader of the Space Knights. After they were able to defeat them from taking away their planet and sending them back into the cosmos, Rom was the one who said, we can't go back to being humans again because there's other worlds that these guys are going to go after. So he and his fellow Space Knights, Starshine, Terminator, Firefall, Breaker, Pulsar, Scanner, Seeker, Trapper, and Una the Unseen. Those were pretty much the first round of Space Knights, and they all went out into different worlds and protected them in different ways, some not so great. But I'm a huge Rom follower, and he is the only hero in all of Marveldom that I can think of that never went bad. He wasn't a Hydra agent. He didn't switch and become something else. He's always been the good guy, and he is a great leader because when other members needed him, he would go out and he'd be there for them. And I've always loved his story. I've got way too many sets of comics from him. I've done my own bound set a few years ago, so I'm not buying the more recent ones. But if you go through those comics, you will see not only is he a great guy, but as a great leader, he is always looking to protect Earth, even at his detriment, because everybody always thinks he's a killer robot at first. But then you look and you talk about all of the great teams with their leaders. At one point, the dire wraiths come back and they're trying to do a spell where they're going to open up a black hole in our sun and they're going to merge our two planets together. Rom is the leader of every team on Earth. He's got Captain America coming to him. He's got the X-Men. He's got all of these different groups asking him, what do we do? And I can't think of a better leader than Rom, the Space Knight.
Absolutely, makes sense.
Excellent choice.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Now, are either of y'all readers? Are you familiar with it?
I have not read Rom Space Knight. So
okay.
Yeah, it's on my list. I'm
Yeah.
I'm always looking for it in bins. If I see several issues, I would buy it, but I have not actually.
Yeah.
Rom has not been in my bins somehow. Yeah.
Well,
it's Marvel Unlimited. Do you know?
Well, it just came out because there was a whole thing where Parker Brothers owned the robot and the word, I forget what they called it, but they owned that, and they came to Marvel and said, here, we want you to do a series, pretty much like the way they did with Transformers and G.I. Joe and all of these other titles. And so there for a long time, you got all of these crossovers. Many people will say that when the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants showed up, where Rogue was a current member at that time, she actually took off her glove and put it onto Rom, thinking it was a person inside there and she was going to depower him. But it didn't, and it backfired on her. And after that, she started having second thoughts about being an evil mutant and seeing what he did. And so a lot of people that are Rom fans will make the argument that Rom's the reason that Rogue turned toward a good life versus the other things. Yeah. So, and their comics were always up until the 50s, they were always 2-issue arcs. And so you would get the X-Men show up in one and thinking he was a bad guy, and then they figure it out in the second one and they go to defeat it. Alpha Flight, Power Man and Iron Fist, and the list goes on. So if you're ever again, never went bad, not once. And now that they finally have him back in the Marvel Universe, maybe we'll see it. James Gunn always said he was one of 2 characters that he wishes he could have put in Galaxy.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool.
Well, that is the end of our list. And you guys, I mean, I knew you would. I mean, you're in a freaking book about it, but some great choices, and especially the great stories behind them, because that's what makes things our favorites. is
Absolutely.
what we see of them. So again, I want to thank you both for being here. We'll have all your socials and people can buy your books. So if you see an incredible jump in sales over the next few weeks, know that it's not me. Something else has happened because I've got like 19 people. And I want to thank all of you out there in the podcast universe for listening to this episode of Fave 5 for Fans. We hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, please leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast apps. It's a free way that you can help the show grow. And if you didn't like it, consider telling someone you know who is probably like a big fan of Paste Pot Pete or something like that, because he's got terrible, and this may ruin his afternoon. We also invite you to interact with us on Twitter or X, I forget what it is this week, at Fave, the number 5 from Fans. Catch new episodes every Friday, so be sure to subscribe, follow us, and you'll get all of them, like a disease. And don't forget to look for our other show, Complete Disarray with Jamie Ray, where we take one topic and just ramble on and on about it. But in a good way, really. And remember, folks, it may not be the best, it may not be the most popular, but if it's your favorite, then it's good for us. Thanks for joining us. Gentlemen, take us out.
Leaders assemble.
Assemble.
Y'all have a great one.